Share my screen. Oh, I'm not able to share screen because it's disabled.
Should be good now.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Sorry for the delay there. We had some trouble getting the Zoom started. But today is May 6th, 2020, and this is the Cluster API office hours. Cluster API is a subproject of Cluster Lifecycle. We are following the meeting etiquette that you can find on this Google Doc here. Please use the raise hand feature if you want to participate, and go ahead and add your name to the attendee list and any topics you want to discuss to the agenda. So we always start with welcomes and introductions. So if you're new to this meeting and you haven't been here before, or if you haven't been here in a while and you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself, now is the time. I'll mute myself for a bit and you can go ahead and say who you are and why you're here and what company you work for.
Hi, I'm Jacob Lankhurst, and I've attended a couple meetings. I work at Rancher Labs, here to learn all things Cluster API.
Welcome. Do we have anyone else who'd like to introduce themselves?
Yeah, hi, I'm Claudia Barsford. I'm a tech lead at Ori Industries and just here to see what's up and learn about Cluster API.
Welcome, Claudia.
Yeah, hey, it's my first time here as well. I work at Ori Industries with Mel and Claudia, and yeah, I'm here to learn more about Cluster API and yeah, see how it can help us with some of the things we're doing at Ori.
Welcome.
And I guess I'll also introduce myself. This is Mel, and yeah, I'm also from Ori, and we're trying to figure out how we can help, I guess.
Awesome. Great to have you all here. Anyone else? All right, if not, I'll move on. So before we move on to PSAs, I just want to point out for anyone who's new or who hasn't been here in the last few weeks, we have this general questions section now. It's right below demos and POCs. And these are really intended to help anyone who's implementing a provider or who has any newcomer questions about the projects. So feel free to add any questions throughout the meeting and we'll answer them async and take the time to go through them at the end. But if you have any bigger discussion topics, those should be in discussion topics here. So I think, Vince, if you want to take the PSAs.
Yeah, thank you. So just a little PSA, like we did a 0.35 release following up from 0.34 last week to have some bug fixes, particularly cluster cuddle init and cluster cuddle move. Feel free to look at the release notes, like there were 2 bugs that were affecting users. And the most important thing here is the Kubernetes 118 support clusters, and like now, like we're able to actually like upgrade or init 118 clusters for Cluster API. But this will be the minimum version if you're creating workload clusters with 118. Any questions on this one? Okay, proceeding with the other PSAs, like we identified a bug yesterday. So if you have Alpha 2 and Alpha 3 controllers running at the same time with conversion webhook in place, there is an infinite loop bug, which was actually kind of interesting. And there is a full like a walkthrough in the PR description on like how this happened and like what we did to kind of solve it. So we need to cut a new release of Alpha 2, which is going to be 0.2.11, which is going to be also the new minimum version that you will need to upgrade to Alpha 3. And we'll also need like a 0.36 update, which fixes also like another issue in the webhooks that we have. There's a lot of more details in the PR, so if you're interested, please take a look.
Thanks, Vince. Do we have any questions about that? Right. Okay, so I don't see any demos for today, so we'll move on to questions. Okay, so we have a first one from Maël. I hope that's how you pronounce your name. What is the reason behind making kubeadm commands and files field of the kubeadm control plane spec immutable? This is related to this issue. Do we have any volunteers to help answer this question? I'm not sure what the history behind it is.
I can take it.
Yeah, thank you, Andy.
So we initially had the entire kubeadm control plane spec, or at least most of it, immutable. And we have, in pieces, been opening up some fields to mutability. And this is largely because any mutations that we do allow require us to generally implement some code to do something with supporting those changes. So for example, we most recently allow you to change the image repository that is used in the kubeadm configuration. And we had to write a bunch of code to get that data synced over to a config map in the workload cluster and do some other, just some other manipulations to make sure that that works. So the short answer is everything was immutable, and we are totally open to entertaining the idea for evaluating various fields to allow them to be mutable as well. Part of it also, I think, tends to do with being able to support rollbacks. If we were to ever do that, it's a little bit harder if you've got a single object or single resource like kubeadm control plane and you don't have any history when you're changing spec fields, versus what we have with machine deployments and machine sets, where it is possible to roll back because of some functionality that we've built into those two types. But yeah, I think those are the two reasons, or two things to talk about. Unfortunately, Jason's on vacation this week, so I'm sure he would have some more stuff to say as well. But that's a brief history of why we have what we have.
Makes sense. Thank you, Andy. Maybe we can continue this conversation in the issue then, so other people can participate. Okay, so second question is, why is provider ID field required on both machine and on infrastructure-specific machine objects?
Yeah.
I can answer that one too, but I'll give others a chance to speak if they'd like.
Anyone want to take this one? I think you can take it, Andy. I don't see any raised hands.
So we need the provider ID so that we can ultimately associate a node in a workload cluster with a machine in the management cluster. And we do this in large part to be able to check the node's health. So for machine deployments and machine sets, we're able to tell how many ready versus unready replicas that we have. And for machine health check, we're able to evaluate the state of the node and decide if a machine, or if its associated machine is healthy or not. The reason that it needs to be on the infrastructure machine object is because the infrastructure provider is the one that owns the provider ID. And then we copy that data to the machine object because that's the only thing that, or it's not the only thing, but that tends to be the data type that the core components in Cluster API work with. So when we're looking at machine health or machine set and machine deployment replica status, we're going to map between the provider ID on the machine and the provider ID in the node. We could look at the infrastructure machine provider ID, but we've had it on the machine pretty much from the beginning, I think.
Okay. So I guess I'm hearing mostly historical reasons. I just find it very surprising that the controller explicitly looks in both places. I mean, you know, if it can find one of them.
Well, so we have the machine controller is responsible for copying the value from the infrastructure machine to the generic machine. And as far as I'm aware, that's the only controller that's looking at the infrastructure machine's provider ID. The CubeADM control, well, I don't know if KCP, I mean, anything that needs to do like a node ref match is going to do it. Actually, let me pause. Yeah, I mean, basically, if we need to evaluate the provider ID anywhere, and I apologize, I don't remember if we have other places in the code that's looking at it, but they're going to do it off the machine. It's just easier to work with for right now. But we could maybe evaluate if we don't need to copy it around. But yeah, sorry if that's a little scattered.
Well, okay, it sounds like I'll file an issue about this because, I mean, I haven't come across the copying behavior. I've just come across the rejecting behavior. It says, oh, you don't have a provider ID. And if it can look in the, I mean, to me, the provider specific code is where it should be. So, and given that the machine controller does look there, I think it should just always look there. But that's two different issues, I guess.
I think Vince wants to add something.
Yeah, I was checking, like, so it's like double checking, like it's not required on the machine type. So the machine spec is actually optional. It is synced to like just provide a way for others to like to use it as well without inspecting the end objects, which like you need unstructured and like it's not typed and things like that. So we do it by contract, but it's not like required on the machine spec.
Yeah, I posted the link to where it's required on the machine spec.
So for that check, it's actually like that means like it's missing, but the reconcile, like, so if you can open this, like others can see as well, like that check like pretty much says like I don't have a node ref yet, so like I need I don't have a provider ID, so I cannot assign a node reference, which means the infrastructure provider hasn't set it yet, and we're not able to sync it back. So it's not like required from an API point of view. It's that like after a while, like the machine controller will try to reconcile the node reference. So it will go into workload cluster and say, do I have a matching Kubernetes node, and can I link it back to this machine? But without the information coming from the infrastructure provider, we don't know how to make that association. And so we wait for that data to be ready before syncing it back.
Yeah, I can read what the code does. I'm asking why it does it, and you haven't provided. I'll file an issue. It's all right. It sounds like it's just kind of two bits of history coming together.
Yeah, I'm guessing that once we get the node ref, we could probably throw away the provider ID.
You can navigate down the infrastructure ref. I mean, it does that. I can't find the reference right now, but.
Yeah, it does that, but like we want to expose it for others to use it as well without going to that navigation into the infrastructure machine. That's the reasoning that like we did this.
All right, I'm going to move on just in the interest of time, but if Ryan, you could please file an issue, that'd be great so we can follow up on that. Thank you. Okay. CAPZ manager v0.3.0 is not present. I'm assuming you're talking about the image. Is that?
Yeah, sorry. I didn't have time to add a link to this, but in the GCR registry, where there is the 0.2.1 capd image, but the 0.3.0 has not been pushed, and it's probably due to the fact that there has been a move from, like, the provider was previously in its own repo, and now it's in the cluster API repo. So I don't know.
Yeah. Daniel?
Hi, yeah. You are, if you're trying to use the Docker provider, yeah, the experience has changed slightly. There is documentation in the Cluster API book. There's a quick start page, and then from the quick start, it'd be great if you could open it. Though, thank you. On the quick start page for Docker, I think there should be a. Actually, I'm sorry. I think it's the cluster Cuttle for developers. But I think there's a link from the quick start to Cluster Cuttle for developers, and that gives all the instructions for using the Docker provider. Is that what you were trying to do?
Yes, exactly. And so I just wanted to skip on the building the image step. That's yeah.
Yeah, I think right. There are some reasons why that image isn't being published right now. But if that's if we want to do that, maybe I don't know if there's an open issue already, or if you want to file an issue, maybe we could follow up there.
Sure, I'll do that. Sorry, I forgot to, like, this question came up in my mind 5 minutes ago, and yeah.
Yeah, and if you have any issues following those instructions, please ping me in the Slack channel, Dilo Pavetsky. There's actually something that I think needs to be added right now about the cluster template. So anyway, you can follow up in Slack, and we'll make that documentation better.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. And I see Warren posted a link also in the chat, the Zoom chat, with a link to additional steps for the Docker provider, which is that section that you will want to look at. All right. So let's move on to proposals. And actually, I have the first one in there. So I opened a Google Doc proposal. It was initially motivated by wanting to move the etcd data directory to an external disk, not on the OS disk in CAPZ. And I know Kappa has a similar issue to improve performance. And this actually requires some changes to upstream cluster API because we need to be able to mount the disk, which requires some changes to Cloud Init. So this proposal is, I guess, twofold. There's one part about implementing a general way to mount, or to set up partitions and file systems and mount them in Cloud Init as part of the kubeadm config spec. And so it's this one. And so this doesn't have any knowledge of etcd. It's supposed to be generic and reusable for other purposes. And then there's the second part, which is how to actually leverage that to put the etcd data on a disk in CAPZ. So there's a prototype. I think I put the link. I have a prototype working for both Cluster API and CAPZ. And Matt, who I don't know if he's in the meeting, but has been helping me review because he also has a prototype for Kappa. So we're making sure that this works for both. But yeah, please review. And I think I'm going to move this to a PR next Monday, since I've already gotten a lot of comments, but I'll let it sit for the rest of the week so other people can take a look. Any questions on that? All right, well, I'm seeing a few plus ones, so since, yeah, great. Yeah, one thing I want to say is there is a bit of a difficulty about like knowing which data or which device etcd ends up on, or the disk, sorry, ends up on. It is an infrastructure specific problem though, so I think that shouldn't affect what we do for CAPI in terms of like supporting generic file system mounting for QADM Bootstrapper. Okay, Fabrizio, you have the next one. Take it away. If you're talking, we can't hear you.
I think Fabrizio like is not here. He just
Okay.
probably wanted like some more eyes on the conditions proposal. I think it has already moved to a PR as well.
Right.
But if like folks like have time to review it, that would be great. Like on the PR, and yeah, we'll probably proceed maybe like for I guess like another week of comments, so until next week, and then try to merge it as provisional and start implementing it.
Awesome. I guess one question I have for you, Vince, since we're following the new process, and other people might be wondering the same thing, are there any expectations around how long a proposal is supposed to stay in a Google Doc versus when to move it to PR, and how long to hold the PR for merging?
So for PRs, in the past we did a 1 week kind of timeout if there are like no comments, or like there's like a very low flow of comments. For the Google Doc, it's like up to like the author to decide like, okay, like I don't have enough comments, like, or like it's time to like open a PR. So that is like a more like, you know, use your best judgment. For the PR, it's like a 1 week time frame.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks. Nadir, you have Kappa controller multi-tenancy.
Yep. So this one's specific to the AWS provider, but I know other people are interested in doing the same for their providers. So we had some discussions on Friday with people interested in the issue across AWS and Azure. And basically the idea is that to balance concerns around RBAC, etc., to have cluster scoped principles that can then be delegated to namespaces for use. Yeah, just take a look, see if it's relevant to you, and if you've got any comments. Thanks.
Thanks. Any questions about that? Okay. All right. So now we have infrastructure linking through CAPI, related Kappa issue. Seth?
Yeah, so we talked about this a little bit in the Kappa meeting on Monday. The V1 Alpha 3 sort of rework, or V1 Alpha 2 rather rework, made it difficult for infrastructure providers to reconcile like provider-specific mutable fields. AWS tags being sort of one we started focusing on there. But the idea is that because it's not obvious which AWS machines were created by which AWS machine templates, the provider has to do sort of some hoop jumping to figure out what changes should be propagated where in terms of objects. And in that discussion, we sort of had the question of, you know, this would be a lot easier if CAPI were to link those two objects together at creation time. But that would be a change and possibly impact other providers. And so I just sort of wanted to surface it and hear if anyone has any strong objections or concerns.
Any questions or comments?
I would say like it probably needs a proposal. Or, I mean, we can start with an RFE issue just to brainstorm it. But yeah, like, I have a few questions, like for example, about immutability of that the new field being added, things like that. But
yeah, +1.
Thanks.
All right. So I think that's it for proposals. So we're going to move on to discussion topics. I only see one in there. If you have anything you want to bring up, it's not too late. Go ahead and add your line below. But for now, I'll leave it to Ria to talk about doc support.
Cool. Thanks, Cecile. Hi, everyone. So I've updated the issue over here, but basically we've decided that well, at least I've decided, if you have any other opinions, let me know, that we want to first allow providers to PR docs into their respective repos and then use a config file to basically pull all those docs into CAPI. So we want users to land in the same place, which would be the CAPI book, whether it's for specific features like machine pools and how to implement it in your own cluster, et cetera, or networking. And so with that, we want to create a separate section within the CAPI book for providers and create basically common doc structures so it's easier to write these docs for people. For example, like machine pool support, et cetera. And yeah, so I guess the biggest request I have is for the maintainers of CAPI. If you guys could send an email out to the CNCF service desk, they have support for doc writers. And I'm totally fine working closely with them, but I think it would be really nice to get an actual doc like resource, someone that knows how to structure docs really well for this. And the CNCF should be providing support. I've worked with them in other open source projects before. So yeah, that's my request. You can link the issue and it should easily like go through. Feel free to CC me if you need help. Yeah, so any comments? Cool.
That sounds really good. I like the idea of having one place for users to see documents. Mike, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think the proposal sounds great. I guess the experiences I've had in the past with this kind of thing, it seems like we could create some, some templates that could live in the main repo, and then we could kind of give instructions on how people could copy those and make it really easy to add this stuff, in their own repositories, basically.
Yeah, that sounds great. That's definitely the hope. We want this to look really similar across providers. So when folks are jumping from one provider to the next, it's really easy to find information and kind of use any provider that they choose or multiple. So totally. Any more comments?
Would the structure like be dictated in CAPI and then like the actual markdown document will live somewhere else, or like they would still live in the CAPI repo?
The actual markdown document would most likely live in the providers. And so we would basically like pull those in so people, they could PR their own docs within each provider repo. And we would have this config file that would pull all those docs into the website. So they would actually live somewhere else. Yeah.
Okay, there might be some technical limitations on this, but I can discuss
yeah
offline. The other thing, the other question I had in mind is like, how do we make sure that like, because every time we publish the book, like it's going to be for Alpha 3 or Alpha 4, the next version, and instructions might change. They have changed a lot, for example, from Alpha 2 to Alpha 3. So one other thing to keep in mind is that like we might, like if we publish Alpha 4 at some point, I can imagine like some providers like might go in at the same time, some might not. And if these docs like live outside, we need to reconcile them or like maybe remove them temporarily. So just
yeah, we can figure out a way to maybe like tag the docs so only the ones with the specific versions get like kind of vendored in and the other ones we don't. Yeah, that's a really good point to bring up. We do need to figure out all these little technical details. And I think that's going to happen as we start working through building out this structure. We'll find all those things and figure out, like, bring up those issues to this meeting and kind of figure out how to work through them.
Sounds good.
Mike, go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment to like the technical issues. It might, I know there are several people in this community who've also worked in the OpenStack community, but it might be worth looking at the way they assemble their docs, because they did something very similar. The individual project teams could control the documentation, and then they had the centralization of the docs took place through like a publishing mechanism that basically pulled all that in. So there might be some good ideas to kind of crib from there.
Okay, thank you. I will definitely take a look.
Awesome. Thank you, Ria, for bringing this up. This is great.
Yeah, no problem. I also have the next one.
Saw that. Go for it.
It's Cecile's birthday, so happy birthday, Cecile.
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
All right. Do we have any other discussion topics? Anything that you forgot to put on the list? All right. Thanks, everyone. All right. I guess we'll move on to issue triage now, my favorite part of this meeting that I still don't know how to do. All right. So issues. All right, so we have a few test framework ones. Feel free to raise your hand at any point if you want to add anything about triage or, yeah. Okay, so this one is about adding a machine helper to wait and validate status of machine. Any comments on that one? I don't know.
Gabriel would just do help wanted, and I can set the milestone.
Gab, did you want to explain the motivation for the couple of EDE framework issues that you were looking at here?
Sure thing. So the E2E framework right now is currently being used in CAPI, and I'm working on moving some of the Kappa EDE tests over to use that framework as well. And some of the sort of like special cases in Kappa, it'll be nice to have some more helpers in the framework itself.
Okay, got it. Thanks. Right. Okay, so I guess this is related to the question that we had earlier in the question section. About modifying QADM commands during an update. So I think Andy brought up some reasons for why this was like that at the moment. Andy, if you could maybe like summarize your answer here. If you don't
Yeah,
mind.
I can do that.
That way we can track it. And then I don't know if we want to even put that in a milestone or not. I'm not sure what.
I'm gonna set next for now, then we can repurpose it.
Yeah.
But at least it means that we did the triage on it.
Okay. This seems like a bug. Reproed with AWS. Second control plane node. When AWS encryption provider is running. Should this be a Kappa issue or?
I just asked for it to be moved. So it's to do with the experimental control plane join. We do, because of the pre-flight checks operate, you need to have the static pod manifest for the encryption provider available for the API server to come up successfully on a join, I think. So it essentially gets blocked and you can't use KMS, I think. It needs a bit of investigation.
Got it. So maybe what's the tag for more evidence required? Is it?
You can do /priority, then awaiting -more -evidence. I would also tag it with area bootstrap, given that it's related to KPK by Nadir, and maybe assigned to Nadir, given that he spoke up. So
yeah.
What was the last thing you said, sorry?
Oh, it's random.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds good to me. All right.
It's a random variable, yeah.
Yeah, I was, yeah. And then no milestone, this current milestone, maybe? I can do it, but I'll let you do it.
I guess 3x, probably.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Okay, this one, cluster kettle ignores later files defining cheap config variable. Seems like that should be current milestone. Oh, it's already tagged actually. Why did it show up? Oh, it got removed. Oh, I guess it didn't work because for Gridster it doesn't have milestone permissions. But it sounds like it's already been triaged.
Yep, got it.
Okay, flaky test. Fun. All right. So is there any action item on that one, Vince?
So if Ben, if you're okay with it, like we're gonna remove this CAPD end-to-end test, which is like the old one. So if that's okay with you, like we can probably close this.
Yeah, that's fine.
I've
I've been seeing a lot of flakes, and so I've been trying to report them.
Thank you.
In favor of the new, how should I call this, intra end-to-end test? Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right. It's really stressful commenting on issues with 60 people watching. Okay, documentation. Yes, I actually also noticed that while I was going through my etcd prototype. I think we can mark this as help wanted. This is a pretty easy one, just needs to fill out. There's also verbosity, which is missing. Any opinions on milestone? Should we put this as next if it's not blocking, or current one?
I could probably do 0.3x, just and yeah, set the help wanted.
Great. Okay, and then last one is another flaky test. When following the cluster by quick start, should create a workload cluster.
I already triaged this one. I just missed the milestone, but there's already a PR out.
Okay, perfect. Great, thanks. So I think that's it. Yeah.
Yep.
Any last minute questions, comments? I'll go back and see if there are any more questions. No, I don't see any other questions that were added. Anyone have anything to add? Okay.
Thanks for running the meeting.
My pleasure. So yeah, I guess we'll end this one early. Give back everyone 15 minutes of their time. Happy Wednesday. Have a great rest of your week and see you all next week.
Happy birthday.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Happy birthday.